Al Jazeera podcasts.
Hey YouTube, we're switching things up today with an audio-only episode. No video this time, so just pop in your earbuds and enjoy the listen. Today, a major escalation between two nuclear-armed rivals.
Indian authorities accuse Pakistan's military of shelling villages along the de facto border. The violence follows Indian airstrikes that struck 9 sites in Pakistan and Pakistan-administered Kashmir early on Wednesday.
Why India and Pakistan are inching towards a war neither country can afford. I'm Manuel Rapalo, and this is The Take.
I'm Charu Kasturi. I'm a senior editor at Al Jazeera English. I oversee a lot of the original content that we produce on the website.
Charu, India and Pakistan are engaged in the most dramatic exchange of fire since they went to war in 1971. The catalyst for this was an April 22nd attack in Indian-administered Kashmir. Can you tell us the latest?
The latest that we're seeing today, Manny, is that Pakistan and India have each accused the other of launching drones. So Pakistan has announced that it has shot down 25 Indian drones that apparently, according to Pakistan, were aimed at multiple cities, including major population centers like Karachi, Lahore, and other major cities. Pakistan claims they were all shot down, but some of them did hit.
The previous night, India made an offensive mistake, and it will have to bear the repercussions of its actions. Perhaps they thought we would retreat, but they forgot that by the grace of God, we are a nation of brave people who are steely in their determination.
India, meanwhile, has accused Pakistan of having set off similar drones and missiles towards India earlier today, and claims that it shot those down. So in a sense, what we're seeing is a drone warfare kind of scenario that's broken out after India launched actual missiles at multiple sites in Pakistan.
And let's talk about that operation by India, because those airstrikes are part of what has been dubbed, quote, Operation Sindoor. I'm wondering if you could tell us what the significance is of that name specifically, of Operation Sindoor.
Sure. To understand the significance of that name, I think we need to circle back for a second to April 22nd. Gunmen emerged from a forest next to a meadow in Indian-administered Kashmir, segregated men from women among a large group of tourists, and then among the men identified non-Muslims and specifically targeted them, leaving a number of Hindu widows. Now, Sindoor, which was the name of the military operation that India launched against Pakistan, means vermilion in Hindi and Sanskrit. Vermilion is cosmetic, reddish-orange cosmetic that Hindu women apply to their forehead as a sign of their marital status. And when they're no longer married or are widowed, they no longer wear it. So in a sense, the Indian government, by naming the Operation Sindoor, is signaling that it's a sort of revenge for the attacks of April 22nd that left many Hindu women widowed.
Regarding that attack that took place on April 22nd, as you mentioned, 26 tourists who lost their lives in that attack. Pakistan was quick to deny any involvement in that. What evidence has India presented that Pakistan was responsible in any way for that attack?
India hasn't publicly presented any evidence to demonstratively establish that Pakistan was involved. But what has happened is that a little-known separatist group in Kashmir known as the Resistance Front initially came forward and claimed responsibility for the attack.
The Kashmir Resistance claimed responsibility for the attack on social media. It expressed discontent that more than 85,000, quote, outsiders had settled in the region.
Now, they subsequently backtracked on that. But the Resistance Front, India, is actually a front for the Lashkar-e-Taiba, which is a Pakistan-based armed group that has been known to carry out some of the worst attacks in India, including the 2008 Mumbai attacks. So it's that link that India is using to suggest that Pakistan is somehow responsible for the attacks of April 22nd.
And we were expecting largely that there would be a response from India as well. Narendra Modi has been under public pressure to attack Pakistan, to sort of maintain that strongman image in India.
The entire country is angry and wants to see revenge. Like our Prime Minister retaliated in the past, we want the attackers to be found and shot. Only then will we find peace.
What is the Indian public's response to this military escalation?
I think it's a mix of celebration and panic and fear, if I may be honest. So I think what the Modi government managed to do after the April 22nd attack was actually galvanize the entire nation behind them in seeking some sort of retribution for the attack on April 22nd. Now, what's really interesting, if I may just kind of add, as a matter of fact, is that the actual gunmen who were involved in the attack of April 22nd still remain free as of now. 15 days later or 16 days later, India has still not been actually able to nab them. When the attacks did happen on Wednesday on May 7th against Pakistani sites, I think there was a lot of celebration in India that it was seen as India actually showing that, yes, we can hit back against the perceived backers and financiers and supporters of the attackers in Indian administered Kashmir. But subsequent to that, as Pakistan has made clear that it too will hit back against India, and the mood on the street in India is one where that celebration is now tinged increasingly with panic or apprehension.
Our livestock and belongings are all gone. Nothing is left. This shelling must stop, and there should be peace. For God's sake, give us peace. We want peace for everyone.
India has used terms like measured response, saying that these airstrikes were, quote, calculated, that they were, quote, proportional responses. Does this give you the sort of impression that India has concluded its military response, that this is the extent of what we might see?
That is indeed what it seemed like. Actually, if you looked at the Indian response yesterday, as you pointed out, the repeated references to it being a restrained attack, a measured, proportionate attack, that India chose not to target any Pakistani military institutions. All of that is language that suggests that India was trying to convey to the world and to Pakistan that, look, we've done what we had to and we don't want to go any further. But since then, these drone strikes and statements coming out of the Pakistani government suggest that we're not anywhere near the end of the cycle, unfortunately.
You know, Charu, I think that talking about India and Pakistan and the history of the tensions and animosities merits its own episode. But can you talk to us about the significance of Kashmir?
So Kashmir is really, in many ways, at the heart of the India-Pakistan story and at the heart of the tensions for the last 78 years since they both gained independence as the British left the subcontinent.
Bombay sees a postscript to the Independence Day celebrations as Lord Mountbatten bids farewell to the first British troops to leave India since the transfer of power.
Kashmir was then a princely state ruled by a Hindu king who wanted to keep Kashmir independent of both India and Pakistan. It was a Muslim-majority princely state, however, and so Pakistan, which was founded on the presumption that it would be a Muslim homeland for Muslims of the subcontinent, believed that Kashmir would eventually join Pakistan. You had armed raiders from Pakistan who tried to occupy and did occupy a part of Kashmir at that point. At that stage, the king of Kashmir reached out to India and asked for help to intervene against those Pakistani raiders. India said it would, but on one condition, that the king would sign an instrument of accession, basically merging Kashmir with India. You then ended up in a situation where at the end of that first conflict over Kashmir, Kashmir was divided between India and Pakistan, with a tiny part of it already occupied by China up at north. And the part which was in India, is what we call Indian administered Kashmir. The part that's with Pakistan is considered Pakistan administered Kashmir. But both India and Pakistan claim all of Kashmir. Well, to be honest, Pakistan doesn't really claim the part that's held by China, but India certainly does.
Kashmir has been a flashpoint for India and Pakistan since they became independent nations in 1947, but something happened in 2019 under Narendra Modi's government that had not happened during previous governments, and that was stripping away of India-administered Kashmir's semi-autonomous status. What have things been like there since 2019?
So just to kind of backtrack for a second, that semi-autonomous status was in many ways the bedrock on which Kashmir acceded to joining India in the first place. So to many Kashmiris, it was kind of a trade-off. Look, we'll join you, but on the condition that we have the special status of some sort of an autonomy. When that was stripped away in 2019, as you said, Kashmir was suddenly left even weaker in terms of its rights, in terms of its place in the Indian state than many other Indian provinces. It was pretty much directly controlled by New Delhi from there on. India and the Indian government under Modi at that point proceeded to introduce a massive clampdown on civil rights, on the internet, on everything really in Kashmir. Thousands of people were arrested, political leaders of parties that subscribed to the Indian constitution were all jailed and locked up. And while the Indian government under Modi claimed that all of that was helping Kashmir limp back to some sort of normalcy, and they cited a rise in tourist figures for that, the reality was it was a very uneasy calm in Kashmir, and things were never remotely normal since 2019. And then you have this situation that happened on April 22nd, which kind of burst that myth of normalcy in a very bloody and brutal way.
And it's moments like what the world saw on April 22nd that are a sort of unfortunate reminder of how emotionally charged the question over Kashmir really is. India and Pakistan have fought 3 full-scale wars over Kashmir in the past. Both are nuclear-armed nations. Can this region afford a 4th war?
I mean, before we come to the region, frankly, I don't think either of the 2 countries can afford a full-fledged war. Pakistan's economy is in quite a bit of a strife. It's deeply indebted. It needs to pay back a bunch of loans. Its economy is growing at a little over 2%. I don't think it can afford to be mired in another full-fledged war. India's economy is far stronger and bigger, but, there are these dreams that Modi has kind of peddled of India becoming a $5 trillion economy and of becoming this major economic and geopolitical power. All of that hinges on stability in India. You're not going to have investors lining up to come to India if it's locked in a war with a nuclear-armed neighbor. You're not going to have tourists coming up. You've already seen flights cancelled in both countries. So it's in neither's interest strategically or economically for this to kind of escalate into something worse. But the truth of the matter is that when you're in this kind of a conflict and stakes are as high as they are and there's public pressure on both sides, all it needs is for one miscalculation to plunge both nations into something worse than even they might have wanted to get into.
One thing that I've found very interesting, and this escalation hasn't just come with a military response. It's also resulted in the suspension of a treaty that survived 3 India-Pakistan wars, the Indus Waters Treaty. What can you tell us about that?
India and Pakistan, or rather northern India and all of Pakistan, rely very heavily on the rivers of the Indus Basin. The Indus Waters Treaty was signed in 1960 and is mediated by the World Bank. It has survived multiple wars and not been impacted. The problem, though, is that for many years now, India has seen the Indus Waters Treaty as inherently unfair, and so has in some ways almost been looking for an opportunity to walk away from it or to renegotiate it. India, being the upper riparian state, has the upper hand as well, because in theory, if it were to want to kind of stop water flowing into Pakistan, it could.
Recognizing the seriousness of this terrorist attack, the CCS decided upon the following measures. 1. The Indus Waters Treaty of 1960 will be held in abeyance with immediate effect until Pakistan credibly and irrevocably.
In practice, it can't do that without causing floods in its own water, in its own territory. So India cannot as of now, realistically, actually stop all water going into Pakistan. But by even leveling the threat and by walking away from the treaty as it has after April 22nd, it's really kind of signaling an escalation in terms of telling Pakistan what it could do if it wanted to.
I want to talk about the spheres of influence here. In simplified terms, you have Pakistan, which has a close relationship with China. India has a close relationship with the United States. You also have other countries like Russia and Iran in the mix, sort of offering to help mediate, preventing this from escalating into something of a full-blown crisis. You mentioned the high stakes. Do any of these countries that I just listed have the leverage or the influence enough to sort of put an end to any further escalation?
I think, what's really interesting is that the only country really that both India and Pakistan would feel compelled to sort of listen to some extent and not upset too much is the one country that seems to be taking a slightly hands-off approach at the moment, which is the United States. The US has in the past actually helped broker peace between the two. China has a lot of influence over Pakistan, but it doesn't have much influence over India, which India and China kind of like rivals at the moment as well. Some of the Gulf states do have influence over both, but I'm not sure any of them have the kind of influence that the US does. Russia has influence over India, but not over Pakistan. So you're in a situation where the only country that really, at the end of the day, does have some sort of leverage over both in terms of them not wanting to kind of upset the other side too much, it would be Washington and Donald Trump. And I actually think some of the messaging that we're seeing coming out of India, especially about the response being proportionate, about it not being escalatory, etc., is very specifically targeted at Donald Trump.
Charu, I'm interested in getting your perspective as an editor for Al Jazeera because you are seeing so much of the media narrative in real time. I'm wondering what you're observing in terms of that media coverage, because we hear all of the latest from the Indian side, we hear all of the latest from the Pakistani side, but it leaves that question sort of begging, where does this leave the Kashmiris themselves?
Where it leaves the Kashmiris themselves, unfortunately, is trapped between two nuclear powers who both claim to want Kashmir and do want Kashmir, but for whom, unfortunately, the interests of the Kashmiri people often take a backseat. For instance, as we saw in the aftermath of India firing those missiles into Pakistan, Pakistan's been retaliating by firing a whole bunch of munitions across the de facto border between the two countries into Indian-administered Kashmir, where several people have been killed, others have been wounded, homes destroyed, in what locals there tell us is the most intense shelling they've seen from Pakistan in 40 years. That is the kind of backdrop in which Kashmiris overwhelmingly would be possibly the worst affected if the two countries were to go fully at blows with each other. Kashmir would be at the front lines of that conflict. And I say this as someone who's fortunate at this moment, in some ways, to not be in India and Pakistan. Fortunate as a journalist, because it gives me a chance to be away from the warmongering that we're seeing on both sides. But the reality is that Indians and Pakistanis have a lot more in common than things that divide them. For a large number of people on both sides of the border, the language is almost the same. The food is almost the same. The clothes they wear are almost the same. The music they listen to is almost the same. The films and film stars they want to watch and that they idolize are almost the same. So there's a lot that kind of binds them together. Kashmir is a point of divide, but it's an emotional point of divide also because it's, if I may say so, been made that way by political leaderships on both sides of the country. Indian armed forces over the decades have been accused of carrying out horrific human rights violations in Kashmir. India, on the other hand, argues that Pakistan supports, backs, and finances and shelters armed groups that supportive of secessionist forces in Kashmir and that have carried out attacks on civilians in Kashmir and, in fact, beyond Kashmir. So you have a battle of narratives over Kashmir. Once again, as we spoke earlier, forgotten or ignored very often in all of that is the Kashmiris themselves, who are victims one way or the other. Whomever you want to blame in this, whomever you think is guiltier than the other, the victim is very clear. That's Kashmiris.
And that's The Take. This episode was produced by Haleema Shah, Marcos Bartolome, and Tamara Khandaker, with Phillip Lanos, Spencer Cline, Kingwell Ma, Mariana Navarette, Kisaa Zehra, and me, Manuel Rapalo. It was edited by Alexandra Locke. Our sound designer is Alex Roldan. Our video editors are Hisham Abu Salah and Mohannad Al-Melhem. Alexandra Locke is the Take's executive producer. Ney Alvarez is Al Jazeera's head of audio. We'll be back tomorrow.